A great honor for me to be here this afternoon. And while I stand on existing protocols, I think it's also very important that I thank you all for inviting me to speak at the investiture of the 28th chairman of Nigerian Institution of Estate Surveyor and Valuers, Lagos branch. I thank the chief host of this occasion, NIESV Jumbo Amayebo, PNIVS, ROSV, the President, Nigerian Institution of Estate Surveyors and Valuers. I thank the committee for this honor, especially the chairman, NIESV Tosin Kadri. I thank you for taking time to come see me in my office. I also thank the secretary, NIESV Sholakomi Babarinde, and the chairman of the occasion, my Egbon. Thank you, and it's good to see you here today. So finally, congratulations to the new president of the Nigerian Institution of Estate Surveyor and Valuer, Lagos State, in whose honor we have gathered here today. I read very carefully the document that you prepared in the celebrating the 50 years of NIESV in Lagos, and I can tell and I can feel the weight of history upon you. I thought to speak to you about leadership. And specifically, I would like to speak about Nigeria's leadership and how it shapes our destiny and that of the continent of Africa. Three things have come together that helped me to arrive at this topic. The first is that Nigeria celebrated its 3rd anniversary from British colonialism just this week. That was on Sunday and Monday. We celebrated its 3rd anniversary. So it's important that this week is already important in Nigeria's history. Second, this is an investiture ceremony. And by the nature of investiture, they are all about leadership. And third, and I hope you recognize this, and I have seen a demonstration of it here today. The history of the Nigerian Institution of Estate Surveyor and Valuer is an history of leadership. I saw all the recognition, all the mention, and for over 50 years, your institution have demonstrated enormous leadership in your industry and, of course, in the development of Nigeria. But first, because I am an economist, permit me to start with a data that summarizes Nigerian economic performances independence. Between 1960 and 2020, that's in 60 years, Nigeria's average per capita income, that's if you adjust it for 2010 data, has increased by a mere $1,000. That's all. Meaning that the average income over a 60-year period of a nation that we call Nigeria has merely increased by $1,000. So if you compare that to the global average, Nigeria's income increase over that period is only 1/3 of the average that we have in the whole world. So consider that after independence in 1960, Nigeria was at the threshold of history. We were already considered the leader of the black nation. We were boasting great civil service and, of course, a superb military. There is no doubt in my mind that the gap between the hopes and aspirations of Nigerians and the whole world at independence in 1960 and the reality that we see today is centered around leadership. So, as a student of leadership, I'm often fascinated by leadership lessons wherever I find them. In all my considerations, two have always stood out, and I would like to share those two lessons with you this afternoon. So, my first lesson in leadership. In 1979, I was a very, very young boy. For many of us that were around at the time, now and of course, even in the year 1999, this year should resonate with us. What I mean is that if you were around in 1979 and you were around in 1999, this year should particularly resonate with you because they have the same thread. That year, just as in 1999, Nigeria had new crop of leaders after military rule. But that group still had the crop of leaders that led us through independence and were attempting to provide the kind of freedom described in Nelson Mandela's long walk to freedom. That is the freedom to be free. Though young, I learned and experienced my first lesson in leadership. It happened because my dad had traveled to the UK for further studies. My mom, through no fault of her own, became the sole breadwinner of 9 children. Perhaps if my dad was around, I would have gone to a more established secondary school in Ibadan, but I was shipped to Polytechnic High School, Ibadan. That remains one of the best things that happened to me, but it's not about the school. It is about how the school came about. Chief Bola Ige of blessed memory was elected the governor of Oyo State in 1979. The combined Oyo and Osun states today. In a single day, in a single policy, he established 400 secondary schools and abolished afternoon schools. You can clap for him. In a single day, a single policy, Chief Bola Ige established 400 secondary schools in the whole Oyo State. He equipped these schools. He expanded teaching resources. He bought books. We had excellent teachers, and it was free. Anytime I look back, what that teaches me is that a leader must be incredibly ambitious. Not for himself or herself, but for those he leads. How? By helping them to grow. Today's leaders don't have such dreams and ambitions. We will come to that later. My second leadership lesson, and I reckon it was sometime in 2009, 2 years after I returned to Nigeria after 12 years stay in the United Kingdom. I was with Business Day as the first chief economist and chair editorial board. My office and home were in Amuwo Odofin at the time. I think my wife had asked the driver to get something for her, and the driver was at Mile 2. For those of us that are familiar with Amuwo Odofin and Mile 2, very close. But I remember my wife called me, and I was in the office, and she said to me, oh, the driver has had an accident with a downfall driver. I said, oh. Now, I recall the moment she said that, while I was not sure what the magnitude of the accident was, I remember that the previous week, I had just spent 80,000 at that time to repair the car. That is about spending about 500,000 to 600,000 today. So I was livid. My wife, my friend and colleague then, Michael Hashibogo, and myself, we went to the scene of the accident. Because my driver refused to let the driver of the downfall vehicle leave the scene, many people had gathered. We insisted the driver should face the car, and he argued otherwise. A policeman nearby joined us. Still, no resolution of the matter. Like I said, I just spent 80K on the car and was just not in the mood spending my home money repairing a car that was damaged by someone else. Soon after, a man came in a car, in a nice car, but he refused to come out of the car. I later realized he was actually disabled. He encouraged us why we should leave the driver, but I insisted we were not going to leave the driver until he repairs the car. Unknown to me at that time, that man was not just the owner of the vehicle, he was an area father. Within minutes, so many boys had gathered, and I learned my second lesson in leadership. As we continue to argue, I think I asked one of the boys that approached me to listen to me, and he said to me pointedly, "Why should I listen to you? Do you feed me?" Invariably, it was the man that feeds them. The boys started to beat my driver. They beat my colleagues. They beat all of us. I mean, they didn't touch me, but they beat the policeman. And one man around me, he stared at me and looked at me. Oh boy, leave this scene immediately. That was not all. That's how I sped off with my wife. I left the scene. But that was not all. I went to the police station in Festac to report the case. We were totally and embarrassingly ignored. Wow, welcome to Nigeria. Lessons learned. So my second lesson in leadership is that you must make sacrifices for those that you lead. That man, even though he was wrong on that day, there was no doubt in my mind that for him to be able to gather as much as 15 to 20 boys, he made sacrifices for them on a daily basis. You can say he was the wrong leader. You can say he was not taking them somewhere, but he made sacrifices for them. That is why you could call people to come and fight on your behalf. So, without making sacrifices, you cannot be a leader. So, as I begin to conclude, I want you to picture your mind in Nigeria of today. 24 years after the return to democratic rule, 7 general elections after, our democracy is evolving, our democracy is maturing, but we are not close to the freedom that we believe politics was supposed to deliver. Let me at this point say that military intervention is not the solution because they created the problem in the first place. The solution lies in the eradication of leadership of contradictions. I want you to ponder in your heart for a minute. Who is the greatest and outstanding leader that has emerged in Nigeria since 1999? I bet you will struggle to name one. What differentiates the leaders that emerged before and immediately after independence in 1950s and 60s was because they were focused on Nigeria's political freedom. We trusted them not because they asked for our trust, or forced us to trust them, but because they earned it and they demonstrated it. Since independence, our greatest challenge remains freedom, social freedom, economic freedom, and political freedom. Raising the standards of living, raising the dignity of the average Nigerian, and raising the ability of the average Nigerian to freely choose who leads him or her in a contest that is not only judged to be free and fair in the face of the winner. So 63 years after independence, it is poignant that we remember and reminiscent about the Olusegun Awolowo, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Michael Okpara, Chief Bola Ige, Professor Ambrose Ali, and none in the class of the leaders since 1999. We don't talk about them. Today, the new set of leaders that we have in Nigeria can write their leadership lessons for future generations. What is clear, though, is that those leadership lessons cannot be contradictory in the way it has been since 1999. Consider this. It is contradictory leadership to amass stupendous wealth while the majority wallow in abject poverty. Nigeria has the hurtful distinction of being the world capital of poverty, with 71 million people living in extreme poverty and a total of 133 million classed as multidimensionally poor. But Nigeria also accounts for 1/3 of every pound spent in Harrods of London. It is contradictory. In education, Nigerian leaders have no qualms sending their children to schools in the UK, US, Canada, and everywhere else. Why the quality of education continues to deteriorate in Nigeria? In the last count, there are still about 20 million children out of school. 20% of the global out of school children are in Nigeria. But Nigeria contributes not less than US 2 billion to UK education GDP. That is contradictory. Security. A feature since 1999 is the increasing number of Prados in convoys, more policemen attached to them and to their families. Why the average ratio policemen to the population continue to decrease? It cannot continue to be contradictory where we have sit-at-home Mondays in the southeast, extensive oil theft in the south and environmental degradation in the region, banditry in the north central and northwest, and the unbelievable scale of mineral resources theft in places like Zamfara. In the northeast, Boko Haram and his cousins have scattered and caused nearly 400,000 deaths and displaced over 3 million. But in this same country, we have leaders that travel to France for toothache and ear infections after supposedly spending billions of naira on the hospital that is dedicated to them, while the number of children that die from malaria continue to increase. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, nations rise and fall on leadership. It is therefore difficult for Nigeria to rise when we have lightweight leaders that are easily blown away by issues of corruption, ethnicity, regionalism, and of course, every other thing that blow Nigerian leaders away. So, they are in Africa, they are looking up to us. We are the leaders of the black nation because of the size, because of our resources, and of course, because of the ingenuity of our people. They are looking at us as well because they recognize this size, they recognize the potential, they recognize our resources. But let's be mindful that they will not wait forever. If we refuse to rise from our pedestrian and myopic leadership, I thank you all.